My name is Todd Evans. I'm the Director of Professional Development for Pro Literacy. And advancing the slides is my boss, Michelle Dietrich. Michelle, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, Michelle Dietrich. I'm the Senior Director of Programs at Pro Literacy. Great to see you all here.
Great. And our presentation today is on making your case for adult education and literacy using PIAAC data. So we've got some great presenters today that Michelle will introduce to you in a minute that are going to be talking about how they have used PIAAC data to in their advocacy efforts. They're going to be sharing with you some examples of what they've done. We are recording. I know this is always a question, so we'll send a follow-up email on Monday with links to the webinar recording. You'll get a copy of the slide deck. You'll get a summary sheet, just a little information graphic if you want to share that with your colleagues, let them know what this presentation was about. And then because there's great information in the chat and the Q&A, we also share transcripts of those, and you'll get a certificate for attending. Next slide. We're going to ask that during the webinar, there's a bar at the bottom that has some controls. We're going to ask that you use the chat to introduce yourself. If you want to share links and resources with the group, you can post those in the chat. That's also, as the presentation's going, where we will post the links to the resources that the presenters are talking about, so you can click on them and kind of pull them up while they're talking. We're going to ask that you use the Q&A feature to ask content questions. So if you have a question for one of the presenters, please put that in the Q&A. That lets us track the questions and make sure everybody's question gets answered. The presenters have agreed to stick around after the webinar is over to make sure everyone's question is answered. So this will help us keep track of that. Thanks. For our general webinar schedule, you can go to proliteracy.org/webinars. You'll see all the webinars we have scheduled listed there, kind of general ones like this one. You'll also see webinars for New Readers Press and for members. And in those calendar entries, you can go back to previous webinars and you'll see a link to the recordings. You'll also see a link down at the bottom to a long playlist of all of our previous webinars. We are kind of wrapping up our fall webinar series. We've got a few webinars planned for the spring, but really we're going to spend the holiday break getting those webinars lined up for the start of the year. And then Michelle, I think this is where I turn things over to you so you can use our introduce our presenters.
Great, thank you very much, Todd. Like Todd mentioned, I'm Michelle Dietrich. I'm the Senior Director of Programs at Pro Literacy. I wanted to take a couple of minutes to introduce the presenters for today. Jackie Taylor, if you've been to a few other advocacy webinars, you've heard from her a lot, which is a good thing. Jackie Taylor is an adult learning activist. She's with Jacqueline Taylor Consulting, and also, most importantly, the writer of this amazing toolkit. Laureen Atkins is the Vice President of Strategic Initiatives at the Literacy Cooperative. Greg Smith is the Executive Director of the Florida Literacy Coalition, and Becky Raymond is the Executive Director of the Chicago Citywide Literacy Coalition. So with that, I will start us out. For those of you who haven't attended some of our other advocacy webinars, this is just a quick reminder that we did release this new toolkit about a month and a half ago, Advocacy Toolkit for Adult Education and Literacy. This toolkit is a comprehensive and detailed toolkit designed to help individuals and literacy programs advocate for adult education and literacy in both the private and public sectors. So it's designed so that it can be used by anybody, someone who is very new to advocacy, hasn't been experienced with it before, and also someone who has done it for many years. There are a lot of resources. It's divided into 4 main sections. One, which we'll be covering today, is effective advocacy using PIAAC state and county synthetic data. The other sections include developing effective messaging and the ask, a section on advocating with state and local legislators, and then lastly, a section on advocating with donors, foundations, and corporate funding. So to begin talking about PIAAC and a section of the toolkit. For those who are not familiar, the PIAAC is the Program for the International Assessment of Adult Competencies. It was a large-scale international household study that assessed the literacy, numeracy, and digital skills, also known, you'll see there, problem-solving and technology-rich environments skills. To put it simply, I say digital skills, of adults from 16 to 74. So it was conducted among 24 countries. The toolkit has links to any information that you need about PIAAC, about what PIAAC is, how it was conducted, and the different literacy levels. You'll see a table here with the literacy levels. It details all 5 levels of the PIAAC study and the associated competencies for adults. More specifically, as I mentioned, PIAAC was studied with 24 different countries. When it was released in 2012, it was only national data. And as we know from local programs, they really need that local information to be able to advocate. So in April of 2020, the much anticipated state and county synthetic estimates were released. This right here shows the US skills map. This is from AIR, associated with PIAAC, and it shows the state and county synthetic estimates. It's an interactive map. You can choose a level. You'll see on the left side, you can choose level 1, level 2. You can choose literacy skills or numeracy skills. You can type in a state or search for a state and then search for a county. It allows you to go in and compare national data with state literacy levels at different levels 1 and 2, or in counties, and also allows you to compare from county to county. Our presenters will talk a little bit more about this and how they've used this data and how they've used the skills map to advocate locally. This slide just shows a little bit of a blow up of what the interactive skills map can do. So I chose Onondaga County, which is where Pro-Literacy's headquarters is located in Syracuse, New York. And you can see there that it shows 17% at level 1 in Onondaga County compared to 24% of the state and 22% at the national level. It's an easy tool to use, although there are many resources that can help you navigate through the site. A really important one is the PIAAC Gateway. The PIAAC Gateway has pretty much any and all information that you need to understand PIAAC and navigate through the various helpful sites. One is a video tutorial. So the interactive skills map that I just showed to you, there's a video tutorial to show you how to actually go through every different portion of that. I just showed you the high level information, but there's a lot of different information that you can gain from that. You can dig down into a very detailed level. Another is the sample PIAAC tasks that's available on the PIAAC Gateway. We've received a lot of questions related to the PIAAC levels, level 1, 2, 3. What do those mean and what are those competencies? But people have asked, what does that mean in terms of everyday tasks? How do you correlate level 1 to what an everyday task might be? Or someone with at a low level of 1 might have trouble doing. So this link right here has exactly that. It has a PowerPoint with various examples of day-to-day tasks that are associated with each level. As Todd mentioned, there's a lot of links here. I would encourage you to go to piacgateway.com and search around, but here we'll also share those 2 links with you so that you can go to those specific sections as well. Another great tool outlined in our advocacy toolkit is Barbara Bush Foundation's Literacy Gap Map. So what that does is it combines PIAAC data and illustrates it in relation to other issues related to adult literacy, health, income, poverty levels, etc. And it draws from a variety of sources as well, including America's Community Survey. So that's just another helpful tool that you can use in addition to the PIAAC skills map. One resource that Pro-Literacy has provided is the Adult Literacy Impact Report template. And what we did was to help local programs be able to illustrate their local information along with the impact they're having at their local literacy program. We provided a 2-page tool that we kind of call a leave behind with a state legislator, local legislator, or a public funder. And I say leave behind, but of course it can be emailed, it can be sent and done virtually as well. So it's a 2-pager that allows a program to go in and take information from the PIAAC skills map or the Barbara Bush Foundation gap map, populate it with your local area, along with your local program logo, information about what's happening at your program, student success stories, a variety of information. And I did want to mention that we do have an instructions document that goes along with this, as well as a video tutorial to take you through exactly how to extract information from various sites and insert it into this 2-page template that you can use for a variety of different advocacy efforts. And with that, I'll turn it over to Laureen Atkins, because those are some high-level examples, but these are some local programs who have really been successful in using the PIAAC data, and they're going to show how they've taken it and adapted it for their local use as well. So Laureen, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And I just want to thank you also for the opportunity to be part of this discussion today. I'm honored to be a part of such a great panel, and it's really, I greatly appreciate it. I wanted to start out by just talking a little bit about who the Literacy Cooperative is. The Literacy Cooperative of Greater Cleveland is in Cleveland, Ohio. We were established in 2006 as an intermediary to address the complexities of literacy issues through a common agenda, shared measurement, and mutually enforcing activities. We increase awareness of the implications of low literacy through advocacy and public policy agenda, and we sponsor evidence-based pilots and demonstration projects as a joint approach to prove effectiveness. Our work focuses on career, our adult work focuses on access to career pathways, and we also focus on children from birth to age 5 and the connection between adults and children through some 2-generational programming. What we are talking about today is the PIAAC data and what we did with it in our community. And so if you go to the next slide for using PIAAC data, just some things to highlight. We really looked at the data when it came out in April, and we spent a couple months with our board's research and evaluation committee. That's made up of some researchers and some educators, and really just tried to see what do we need to present to the community. And we came to the conclusion of developing 3 separate blogs. First of all, what we started with, and we tried to time this purposely around different times during the summer and different things that were going on either in the community or nationally. So the first release was in late June, and we introduced the PIAAC US skills maps, and we started to explain the different levels and how our county compared to state and national data. So that was a blog about that, just kind of introducing it. Around International Literacy Day, we did a second release, and we talked more about how now we compare to our county to our neighboring counties, and we actually highlighted, and we have examples of these we're going to show you in a few minutes, but we actually highlighted the level 3 percentages and tried to look at it at a different angle for that. And then lastly, around the time that it was Adult Education and Family Literacy Week, we did a comparison of our county to similar counties within our state and neighboring states, and we focused on counties that had cities that are usually compared to Cleveland. Our reach was about 2,000 subscribers through our email, anybody that was connected to us on Facebook and Twitter. We included it in our Literacy Week in Review, which is basically a weekly newsletter that we publish. And we connected with our state adult education director, obviously Pro Literacy, the National Skills Coalition, and others to really talk about what we found and the work that we did, and just to get more information about how we should use this data and what other things we should be considering. The infographics that I'm going to be showing you on the next few pages are available on our website, and the URL is here, but I know that Todd has already put that into the chat box. So our first one, as I said, we started out by introducing the data as our county, and we kind of did a little bit of a shock value, but we were trying not to make people think that we were saying that more than half of our community was illiterate. What we were basically just introducing is that there's a need in our community, and that we see that more than half of our adults are less than proficient in literacy and numeracy. But then we took time to really explain what that meant, and that's when we really introduced kind of a narrow description of each of the levels, and we tried to do a definition that combined both the literacy and numeracy, and then we showed how our literacy and numeracy levels compared to our state as well as the nation. And I think what we really wanted to press upon is that our community isn't the worst, but it's mediocre and we need to do better. And so we just really started to try, to really try to introduce the topic and see what would happen. The next infographic we did, again, we started looking at, okay, let's look at the positive now. We don't want to dwell on the negative, and let's look at the positive. So we took our community, Cuyahoga being in the middle, and we took all the counties that touch our county. And we said, okay, how are we as the level 3? And we looked at, how all of the numbers, where all the numbers were, and we showed the counties that were exceeding. They were more than half were at a level 3, and it did highlight that we were the lowest at the level 3, but at least it talked more about what is the positive about Northeast Ohio. We again defined the literacy levels, and we again showed the comparison of level 1, level 2, and level 3. And then finally, we wanted to do, in our community, I don't know if your community is anything like my community, but they not only want to know how the neighbors are doing, but they want to know about everybody else in the nation. So then we went and we said, okay, let's look at this on a level that compares our county and our community to like counties within Ohio as well as neighboring states. And when we did that, we looked at it and we just basically showed where these are, what cities are there, so because people tend to remember what we're compared to, and then we showed how our levels were as compared to them. I think the one thing that we're always compared to urban counties, and normally we're compared to those counties negatively when they're talking about poverty and the digital divide, but we thought we would still talk about this in that way. I don't know if I'm waiting for it to advance, because I know there's a delay in some of this information. There we go. So that's the one I was just talking about, how we compare to similar urban counties. The great news, these infographics were developed by a think tank that we have in our community called the Center for Community Solutions, and we love them, and they really help us with this, and they are just learning about how to get involved in adult education and what are the statistics, and really digging deep in it. So it's been very helpful to have them as a partner. So after with the infographics, basically what are our next steps? So we put out these nice descriptions, and what are we doing with them? We're really working with many organizations to find ways to use the data to promote like a skill-based approach to training and employment. We've done some analysis. We worked with American Institutes for Research, the Federal Reserve Bank, the Center for Community Solutions, which is the think tank I just talked about. And we were excited when we talked to the Federal Reserve Bank, because they are really looking on something that does look at skill level. And they have an occupational mobility explorer that just got released this week, that was a partnership between the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia and the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland. And this is it really focuses on opportunity occupations. And opportunity occupations are those that can pay a median salary, but don't require a 4-year degree. So for our adults that, college is far off from them, how can we take the skills that they have in their everyday work and see where they have the deficits, and see where they can tweak skills to maybe get into some opportunity occupations, or change from one opportunity occupation to the next and increase their income. So we're looking at how the PIAAC data and how that information can compare together. Obviously, we're going to continue to advocate for adult education and workforce development partnerships, because we think that's strategic and we think that it's needed, and there's never enough money to do it. And so we also will advocate for increased funding for integrated education and training pilots. In Cuyahoga County, we are blessed to have some sector partnerships in healthcare, IT, and manufacturing, and they really have employers at the table. And the nice part about it is they've also included the Literacy Cooperative at the table. So we are going to be working with them and using this data to support the conversation of literacy and numeracy as part of the skill building within what they're planning to do within these partnerships. Finally, I just kind of want to talk about what our results have been so far. And we've had some good ones and not so good so far, I would say. Our successes, you know, our adult education leadership was interested in our work, and they did promote it, and we were very excited about it, and that also got attention from other adult education partners. So we are grateful for that, and we'll continue our collaboration. We had a good discussion with National Skills Coalition, and they've done a lot of work on this, and I'm really impressed with their adult literacy lens that they have done in recent years. The connection to the Federal Reserve Bank's Opportunity Occupations work and that Explore that I was just mentioning earlier, I think is a win in our community. I think we can learn a lot from it, and I invite all of you to go on there and just look at that. I think it gives you some ideas and may have some potential for some customized training sessions. The other thing, just this morning, I hosted a webinar on this data in our community, and so we were able to get more awareness out there with our partners and with our funders, and really talk about what this data is telling us and what our work should be in 2021 related to this. The challenges have been explaining the levels. Everybody wants to know what does it equal in a grade level. And, you know, it doesn't tell us that. I mean, you know, and what I basically say, and my answer to that has been, you know, if we just look at grade level or educational attainment, we'll continue to struggle with advancing these skills. We've looked at that all along, and we're not seeing these remarkable increases. We need to focus on the skills as it relates to the job and to the workplace, and we need to look at it in a different light and target the way in which we can assist our adults to advance along a career pathway. Our call to action has been difficult, but I think we're working to develop one that bringing these sectors together and organizations together to develop a customized approach to how we look at this. And you know, we've had a challenge with local interest. Today we had a very good turnout, but it's been minimal over the summer. But I really think the timing with the pandemic was partially to blame. So that's the story from Cleveland, Ohio. Thank you.
Thanks, Laureen. And with that, we'll turn it over to Greg Smith.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Hi, everyone. I'm coming at it from a little bit of a different perspective. We're a state organization at the Florida Literacy Coalition that supports programs around the state of Florida. We serve as the state Adult and Family Literacy Resource Center, and we have a special emphasis on supporting community-based, nonprofit and library-based programs. So we, you know, when the map was released, we wanted to make sure that programs in our network were aware of it, and it's a wonderful tool. And so we developed, we added to our website some additional functions, and I'm going to go over there to our site now. So let me pull it up here. Sorry, a little bit of difficulty finding it here. Okay, here it is. Can you see that okay?
Looks great, Greg.
Okay, very good. So so we did a release on the front end. Of course, the timing was very difficult, as Laureen kind of alluded to earlier, that, you know, this was right at the very front end of the pandemic. This was released in March, and so not a lot of media play here in Florida around this, but we certainly worked to get it out to our network and try to spread the word as widely as possible through our social media. We did e-blasts and had in our newsletter and so forth. So our website, this is the map that Michelle was talking about earlier. We did have Dr. Stephen Vaznik, who is with NCES and headed up the US portion of the PIAAC study. So he spoke at our virtual conference this year. And this is a video, about a 20-minute video, as he introduced the skills map and some of the features to it. This piece, I think, is not as well known as they should be, that there's actually a state report for each of the states. And I don't think that the website's really good at making it clear where do you find that. It's actually under the county portion of the filter, not the state portion, which is a little counterintuitive. So anyways, Aisa and our staff put together a little, I think, 30, 40-second video to show you exactly how to get there and be able to pull up the separate document for your state. What we did that was a little bit different is that we really kind of dug into the data, and all this data is available through the skills map, where you can download spreadsheets and kind of parse through the data. And so with the assistance of an intern, we kind of pulled together a bunch of data here just to make it easier for the counties in Florida to compare their data to other counties. The skills map is somewhat limited in that regard. The primary feature allows you to compare to one other county or compare a state to one other state, which we thought there's a lot of utility to be able to look at it in a broader perspective. And so we developed these and really integrated other data sets with regard to demographic data that we felt was useful, that also is available. Now, the Barbara Bush Foundation does this too, to a certain extent. We have a few more categories here, and what we did was we just developed some spreadsheets, nothing too fancy here, but segmented both sort of those that are at or below level 1, and then combining level 1 and level 2, which tends to be our core audience in terms of the students that we serve. The skills map really does focus only on level 1. So with that, you can open any one of these spreadsheets up, and you can sort this data accordingly. So if you wanted to know which county in the state has the highest percentage of residents who don't speak English well, you can do that. And here in Florida, that's DeSoto County, which is a relatively small rural county. A lot of migrant farm workers there. Henry County is also very rural. So essentially, you can kind of parse the data and really sort of look at how you compare both on Literacy 1 level data in this particular chart for both literacy and numeracy, and then other sort of key factors, which include foreign-born residents, those who speak English well, those who live 100% below poverty. This is looking at race and ethnicity, and this one's looking at education level. And you can kind of pull data from that and kind of do some of the kinds of things that Laureen did and ProLiteracy's done. We have like a little summary of some key data points here. Here's an example of sort of using that data. So in Florida, there's a strong correlation between those counties, and this is not a surprise, but it can be strong data to use as you're making a case locally, or in this case statewide. The top 10 counties, or the 10 counties that have the lowest PIAAC literacy scores, are also predominantly those counties that are also the poorest in the state. So 8 of those 10 counties were similar. This is just an article that we did on the front end to sort of summarize the PIAAC. There's a lot there, and people can only sort of digest a certain amount of information, so to be kind of selective in what we share. And these are resources that ProLiteracy's put out, including the toolkit and the templates that Michelle mentioned earlier. And then we have some additional information in terms of what proficiency levels are, and some older PIAAC data. So we find that this is useful. It's been a continuing dialogue with programs. Folks have been waiting on this data for a long time, and being able to get it out and utilize it in an effective way to be able to provide some information as to what the situation looks locally within their respective communities. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to you, Michelle.
Great. Thanks, Greg. I think you need to stop sharing your screen so that I can then share mine.
Yeah, sorry. Here we go.
Perfect.
Okay.
Okay, great. I will now turn it over to Becky Raymond with the Chicago Citywide Literacy Coalition.
Good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank Pro Literacy for inviting me to be on this panel. I'm really impressed with what has been put together in Cleveland and in Florida, and we haven't quite done as much with the recent data as they have. So I look forward to kind of replicating some of the things that I'm learning here. But for those of you that aren't familiar with the Chicago Citywide Literacy Coalition, we are a coalition of more than 50 adult education providers, mainly in Chicago, but across Illinois. We have members throughout the state. We have regional coalition meetings monthly within Chicago, so we're really engaging our members. And many of our members are on the south and west sides of Chicago, which is where the greatest literacy need and all kinds of economic and health disparities exist. So just kind of some background, similar to what Laureen was saying, we provide professional development, technical assistance, pass-through grants to our members. Our team is very busy supporting adult education programs. If you can go to the next slide. So just looking at Cook County, 25% is below level 1, and so that's higher than the national and higher than the state. So, you know, the coalition exists in an area that has great need and all kinds of systemic economic disparities that contribute to this need. So if you could just go to the next slide, Michelle. And I think what I've been getting the message out about around this, the low literacy, is that early on when PIAAC came out, we also saw that in addition to the skills needs in literacy, numeracy, technology, you know, problem solving, that there was also great disparity. And so I'm kind of using this wheel to show that it's hard to say which comes first. The economic disparities feed into the skills gap, and then the skills gap feeds into the economic disparities. So I'm trying here in Chicago to really frame the conversation in a systemic way so that it's not just saying, you know, either, oh, these poor people, or oh, these underperforming people. I want it to be really putting adult literacy as a systemic issue in our nation. And I think that, you know, as we come out of COVID and we come out of all of the uprising over the summer, we as adult educators really must push ourselves to use this data in a way that is a systems frame. Because when we look at the maps, many of the you know, our literacy maps match with health disparities. They match with economic disparities. Greg mentioned that a little bit. We need to really use this data to get to the next level, to say that adult education instruction can be part of the solution, but we need to think about it in a systemic way so that there is opportunity available. We have colleagues at the Chicago Literacy Alliance who have put together what they're calling an opportunity gap index. So they're looking at not just adult literacy, but the whole continuum, and where does opportunity exist, and what are the essential conditions for improving community and individual outcomes. So I'm just really trying to frame it in a bigger way and find those partners in health or in other areas who are working on their issues, but adult education and adult literacy can be a part of that. Okay, next slide, Michelle. So we have used the data, again, to also think of a holistic approach, and we often use the digital literacy indicator as much as the reading and numeracy indicators. So at the coalition, we're really prioritizing career pathways, making sure that individuals have the baseline skills to enter workforce development and job training programs, and the other features to move along the career pathway and to improve communities. So I think that's my last slide. Yes, great.
Excellent, thank you. And thank you to all the presenters. I hope this gives some good examples of how you can use that PIAAC data for advocacy in a variety of different ways. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jackie Taylor.
Terrific. Thank you, Michelle. I'd just like to take a moment to ask a few questions of the presenters, and also to remind everybody that's participating today to post your questions for the presenters in the Q&A section of the webinar. But these questions are for any of the panelists who would like to answer. So my first question is about people's reactions when they learn about the prevalence of low literacy and numeracy in their community. These percentages, especially when looking at levels 1 and 2 combined, are so large that the average person's reaction oftentimes is disbelief. Like, how can that be true? So how do you deal with that reaction?
So this is Laureen Atkins. I'll start and just say that, I really try to chunk the literacy levels out and really focus on level 1 as the individuals of greatest need, and really looking at level 2 as individuals that just need the right combination of skills assistance to get to the next level. And I'm trying not to equate it as, these levels are illiteracy, because I really think that that's a misnomer. And even at level 1, people are working, so they're finding ways to do what they need to do with their skills. And so I think that if you can take it and just say, okay, we have a small portion in this level 1 is really a concentrated effort that we need to make as a community, and that if we can continue to build on the skills of level 2, I think it makes it easier for people to accept. I think if you're putting it together and both of them together, I agree, it brings disbelief.
Thank you, Laureen.
And this is Becky. I also feel like the hard part is not taking a deficit approach to individuals in communities where the need is high. And to me, this just comes back to looking at other indicators to show that, well, not only is the adult skill performance at the lower levels here, but, are there hospitals? Are there libraries? Are there other resources in this community? Because what we're seeing is that this PIAAC gives us the frame where it's not just one-off. We're able to look at the community. What are the community assets? What are the things that have been systemically taken out of this community? And so, I think the challenge for me is always making sure that it doesn't come across as a deficit model of the individuals, and that there are assets there, and that people do have skills, and that if there were more opportunity in their community, this map could look different.
I'd like to add that I think part of the response to that is sharing that, you know, this is a very reputable source, and it's not inconsistent with prior data. So it's very similar to what the findings were for the NAL study. And that's disconcerting in some ways because it doesn't look like we have made great progress, but it reinforces, I think, the legitimacy of the source. So if folks are questioning it, I think it is worthy to mention that this is really the only national study that actually assesses students rather than sort of looking at education level and things, you know, sort of external factors like that, that there's actually an assessment component to add to the validity. That's not to take away from anything that's been said here too, and I too, I'm not inclined to use a deficit model, but it is a big problem. We do have an issue and it's not as visible as I think it needs to be. So this data, I think, is a valid reflection of the challenges we're facing.
Thank you. Thank you. I think thanks to each of you. I appreciate your contributions on that. And I wanted to build on Greg's response in that, Greg, you referenced the NAL back from 2003. And I'm sure probably some other reactions you've gotten, any of you have gotten from the general public or potential allies is, you know, is the US getting better, worse, or staying the same? So are there additional ways that you deal with that question in addition to, you know, referencing that it's the only national assessment and that it's reputable? Do you have any thoughts or additional comments to build onto that?
I do know that it's one of the frustrations is that you can't compare in any really substantive ways the NAL data to the PIAAC data. It's just the reality of the two different studies. So it is a problem. I mean, you can in a general way, but it's not a one-for-one comparison. And that's just a limitation that we have to live with, I think.
I agree with that statement, and you know, I probably am a little snarky in my answer at some of the times when people ask me that. I'll say, you know, overall as a nation, we're not seeing the progress that we need to see in this. And before the county and state data was out, people would say, well, you know, why aren't we doing, you know, what do we think it's going to be? And I said, what innovative things have we done as a community that you think is going to make our number greater than what the national statistic is? I said, let's start thinking about how we can do things that are helping individuals and working together so that people don't have to go to open several doors to get what they need. I said, you know, tell me what we can pinpoint as a best practice in our community, and I will tell you, you know, if we think that we've moved the needle because of it. And nobody could answer that back. So
yeah, and I just really feel like COVID and the uprisings in the summer really brought to light how fragmented our systems are. I mean, here in Chicago, you know, we have so many individuals that don't have access to broadband, so they weren't able to help their kids participate in remote learning. They weren't able to apply for unemployment insurance benefits online. They weren't able to continue in their remote learning classes for English as a second language, GED, or whatever they were studying. So I think that if there's denial about the reality of the skills gap, I can't imagine that after everything we've been through over these past few months that anybody is still not realizing how much work needs to be done to drive an equitable economy in our country.
Thank you, Becky and Laureen and Greg. I just have one more question, and I'd like to turn it over to Todd to take some of the questions from the participants. I don't want to take away time from that. So I'm just curious, what some of you alluded to the kinds of traction you've gotten so far with your messaging, and that perhaps it wasn't picking up as quickly at the local level, or maybe it has. Could you speak a little bit more to the traction you've gotten so far because of this work, and what are you planning to do to get even greater traction?
Well, I'll take a stab at it. This is Becky. We have just become the one-stop operator for Chicago and for Cook County. And so I think that this will really put us in a central role in ensuring that adults who, you know, aren't able to score high enough on a TABE to go into workforce development programming, to make sure that they're getting the supports that they need. So I think that we will be using this data in a very targeted way with some of our different partners, but I think that the approach has to be like thinking of who is in an adjacent sector to adult literacy, whether it's health, whether it's workforce, if it's a K-12, wondering, you know, what's happening for students who aren't able to engage in remote learning, but using it to very targeted audiences is how I see us promoting this data.
We did have a little success just trying to, well, it was picked up. We sent it to our legislative research office that is basically the agency that provides research information to our state legislature, and it was included in their newsletter. It's, you know, the timing again was very difficult, didn't get a lot of media coverage. I do think that there is one element to the data that supports, especially with the emphasis on level 1 and level 2 learners, that really supports the importance of making sure that adult education continues to focus on the needs of those learners. You know, there's been in recent years a lot of emphasis on transitioning to post-secondary and helping students to get degrees and certificates and so forth after they complete sort of high school equivalent education. And you know, this really accentuates the fact that there are a lot of folks who are on the lower end of that scale, and we can't forget about them, and we definitely need to continue to offer services and enhance services to that segment of our student population.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Becky. Laureen, or if you have anything to add, if not, I'm just going to continue to go on. I do know we want to take some questions, and I have a couple of more things I wanted to point out for our audience. So keep thinking about your questions and posting them. And I just wanted to point out real quickly that within the toolkit in part 2 is a whole section on creating effective messages and the ask. And so each of our guests discussed, you know, the literacy, numeracy, and digital skills in the broader context of social issues. So on page 24, the toolkit explores why and how you can frame adult education and literacy in the context of broader issues, such as we've heard from here today. Next slide, please. And then on pages 25 and 26, this is how to explore and how to create compelling hooks within these broader issues, and then how to tie the message to your audience's interest. Oh, I went ahead a slide too fast. Michelle, can you back me up one, please? Thanks. Okay. So in these examples here on economic downturn and recovery and on digital literacy, you'll see some sample messages, and you'll notice that there are some blanks there and some links. And so those links link to the resources we've discussed today, where you can find your local city, county, and or state data in order to customize these messages to your area. So, and then it goes into, next slide, how to ask for support. Who to ask, what to ask, how to ask, you know, whether you're talking to policymakers, private foundations, corporations, small and large donors, and how to ratchet up their commitment with non-policy or funding related asks. How to find that sweet spot where people can commit to contributing in whatever way they can. by getting them more involved, as many of you already do, inviting them to program events and so forth. So these are all different types of asks. The toolkit also guides you through how to craft your messaging and ask with an editable page to help readers plan effective messaging that hooks into various stakeholders' interests, including a specific ask, that is coordinated as a part of a larger advocacy campaign. So next slide, please. And I think maybe we want to stay here. I want to turn this over to Todd and Michelle for questions. Also, if you don't have any questions, just take a moment now and between now and the end of our session to share your key takeaways from today's webinar in the chat. So what stood out to you about our discussions today? And what's one thing you plan to do based on what you learned today? So go ahead and start posting those things in the chat, and I'll turn it over for literacy.
Thanks, Jackie. And yeah, we'll have plenty of time for people to post their key takeaways from today's webinar in the chat. And we do have some good questions. I wanted to go back and just talk to that issue about large numbers that the average person can't kind of grasp or comprehend them. I know we did a webinar last year on storytelling and how to message specifically large numbers like that, like thousands or millions of people that have difficulty reading or can't speak English and things like that. And one of the things that that person talked about was reducing those numbers to something that people can understand. So that's why you would say like 1 in 6 adults have trouble doing this or need help doing this, or 1 in 3 adults. And because that becomes kind of a more manageable number for them to be able to kind of apply those statistics to their neighborhood, their community, the people they know. So just kind of another way of thinking about that. For the group of presenters, we have some questions. The first one's kind of a long one, so I'm going to ask you to kind of be patient and pay attention as I read it. It says, have you used or do you plan to use the PIAAC state and county data and the comparative ACS data, which is the American Community Survey data on poverty, health, access to the internet, and employment? And if you've done that or plan to do that, have you seen some patterns or correlation between low literacy and low numeracy skills and poor health, lack of access to the internet, high unemployment, or high levels of poverty?
Yeah, this is Becky. Yeah, here in Chicago, the Chicago Department of Public Health just recently put out their plan to address root causes of health disparities. And so as they have kind of mapped out Chicago in terms of life expectancy, it's like the same map that we're seeing in literacy. So, I feel like the maps are all the same, whether it's health, whether it's literacy, whether it's food access or housing. I mean, and I do think we plan to use this data to show how our issue is embedded in and aligns with every other, high need area of our society. So yeah, we definitely want to find a way to represent how skills affect each of those areas.
Great. Greg or Laureen?
Well, I just want to add that, it's an excellent question. I think we need to do more in our field to draw these connections. Well, that's a question from David Rosen. I'm involved with the Open Door Collective, and we requested that the county health rankings and roadmap, that's a nationally known database, an information source that looks at each county and a variety of factors. Some of them are more traditional health factors in terms of numbers of folks who are smoking and obesity and teen births, things of that nature, access to health insurance. But they also have other social and economic factors that are part of that, including unemployment, numbers of people living in poverty, numbers of children living in poverty, income inequality, and so forth. And we've requested that this PIAAC data be used as part of their metrics. And we received a, excuse me, initially favorable response. They're still looking at it, but if we can get it as part of that, I think it'll really shine a light on literacy as an important part of the picture when we're looking at all these issues.
And I would just add in Cleveland, we have looked at that, and we are processing the data to see how we can present it to the community, and then also use it to help us overcome and work together and try to overcome some of these issues that are actually plaguing the community. So we just haven't found our best way to present it yet, but we are looking at it.
Great. And Greg, thank you for mentioning the Open Door Collective. I posted a link to their website in the chat room, and that actually is part of the question. The follow-up is kind of, could your organization and other organizations presenting today collaborate on a short joint statement about your findings, perhaps as part of the work that you have done or would like to do with the Open Door Collective? So if you are willing to do that, I think David, who posed the question, will probably reach out to you and connect with you guys. And then our next question is, many of adult literacy learners may not have gotten the right reading and math education at the K through 6 school levels. Are there any coalitions working with the public school system? And then I think this is kind of a follow-up or an expansion from the same person. Public schools spend considerable funding on education. Is there data that shows the outcome of this funding related to literacy and numeracy?
I would just say that the Literacy Cooperative is kind of, we work as like the bookends to the K-12 system. So we help the families when their child is born up until age 5. And then we also work with the adults along a career pathway. We do have communication with the K-12 system, but there's, and there are some of our partners that work with the youth as they're graduating, and looking at ways in which they can engage them either in going into college or getting post-secondary training and going right into the workforce. But I do not have the data on that and how effective it's been.
Okay, great. Anyone else? Okay, the next question, this is a good one. They're all good, but I like this one. Last week in the webinar series, we heard from the Massachusetts Coalition for Adult Education. The state legislature and governor in Massachusetts has since announced a state budget with a 13% budget line item increase for adult basic education. So they talked last week about how they have been advocating for that budget increase, and so it looks like they got it. So great news. This is the third line item increase in the past 3 years. Have you seen any increases in your city or state funding for adult basic skills education, and or do you anticipate any in the coming year?
No, we haven't really seen much in Illinois or in Chicago.
We likewise have not in Florida, and but Massachusetts does a phenomenal job, and it's really a model for the country. I think one of the challenges is that numbers are down significantly in adult education, and it always does make it more difficult to advocate for additional resources when you're serving fewer students. And at least in Florida, that's been a phenomenon that's been happening for a number of years, and of course it's been made more challenging by COVID.
Yeah, we've got similar situation here in Chicago and in Illinois.
And the same in the Cleveland area and Ohio.
This is Michelle.
Great.
I just wanted to make one point related to this. I mean, this is fantastic news for Massachusetts. We cannot overstate that. The flat funding at this point would be considered good news. But Massachusetts Coalition for Adult Education has been really successful in advocating at the state level for funding for adult education for many years. The presentation previous to this one last Wednesday, which you can find on the webinar link that Todd shared, did outline everything that they've done over the last couple of years. So if you're interested in looking at how to develop a coalition like that at the state level and some of the work that they've done to be able to convince lawmakers to invest in adult education, I encourage you to go look at the recording for that.
Yeah, and Michelle, I think one of the things I would just add to that reinforces the point you made and that they talked about last year is that advocacy, it's like constant work and it's long-term work. It's not something that you put together and see results in a day, a week, or 6 months or a year. Like it is a long-term continuous effort. And Jackie, that is all of our questions. And we're a couple of minutes over, but I think that's okay because we got all the questions asked and answered.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. This is Michelle again. Just one last slide. I just want to let you know this is the third in a series of advocacy webinars that we've done that relate to the Advocacy Toolkit. We're going to take a little bit of a break at the end of the year for holidays and vacations, but we're going to pick it back up in January, so we'll notify you all about that. One of the ones we know will be very popular is how to advocate remotely during crazy times like COVID. So there's information right there about where to find these webinars, but we also send it out to all of our networks, so we're looking forward to talking with you then. And with that, if there aren't any other questions, thank you all. Thank you very much to our presenters, Laureen, Greg, Becky, and Jackie. Really appreciate all the information you shared. Appreciate you all being with us today and have a fantastic day.